Early, unfortunately, still held up in traffic, but she'll be joining us in the next few minutes, I hope. I'd like to start this morning's proceedings by telling you what we intend to do. Geraldine has made a recent presentation for the benefit of the government. I have done a presentation in response to the statement made in the Dáil this week by Minister Kathleen Lynch on behalf of Minister Alan Shafer that contains the facts that we're supposed to have no new evidence in the case because it's the anniversary of the tragedy of 33 years ago in the early morning of St Valentine's Day, when the fire was first noticed internally of the building at 1:43 AM in the morning. We know from our research that the fire was obviously through the roof long before that time, something like 1:25, probably some of the order of 20 minutes before it was found or discovered or observed inside the ballroom, where it had spread to the seat in the west alcove. The investigation that followed the event researched the location of the west alcove in its entirety, but it's a matter of fact that the fire did not commence in that location. The fire spread to that location from a storeroom that was on the first floor. The storeroom that in the tribunal of 1981 said was at ground floor with a basement underneath it. There was no basement. In memory of the victims, I would ask now for Antoinette to read out the names of the deceased.
For the 48 victims of the Stardust tragedy, 14th February 1981, we pray for Michael Barrett, Richard Bennett, Carol Bissett, James Buckley, Paula Bourne, Caroline Carey, John Coughlin, Jacqueline Cocker, Lynn Dunn, Michael Farrell, David Flood, Thelma Fraser, Michael French, Josephine Glenn, Michael Griffiths, Robert Killick, Brian Hogg, Eugene Hogan, Murta Kavanagh, Martina Keegan, Mary Keegan, Robert Kelly, Mary Kennedy, Mary Kelly.
Mary Keenan, Sandra Lawless, Francis Lawler, Maureen Lawler, Paula Lewis, Eamon Loughlin, George McDermott, Marcel McDermott, William McDermott, Julie McDonald, Teresa McDonald, Jared McGrath, Caroline McHugh, Donna Mahon, Helena Mangan, James Miller, Susan Morgan, David Morton, Kathleen Muldoon, George O'Connor, Brendan O'Meara, John Stout, Margaret Thornton, Paul Wade. We remember them. In the rising of the sun and it's going down, we will remember them. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember them. When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember them. When we have joys and yearn to share, we remember them. So long as we live, they too shall live, for they are now a part of us as we remember them. In the wind blowing and the chill of winter, we remember them. In the opening of the buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember them. In the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of the autumn, we remember them. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, and we remember them. And we remember them especially today, the 33rd anniversary of the tragedy. Thank you. One second now.
Oh, thank you.
We'll go to Mary on the one.
No, I want to go about coffee first.
Okay, go on.
Okay. I'm Geraldine Foy. Robin's going to hold us up to you. And there was a Dáil debate on Tuesday from Kathleen Lynch and Tommy Breen. I have it here if anybody wants to download it. Now, if there are any journalists here at the moment. What? No, I'm doing something else. Is there any journalists here at the moment? Okay. Could you just come up here, please? I want you to confirm this for the media advantage. This is Paul Coffey's 2 reports under SOY. Robin has a photograph there, and he's going to explain the picture when I get this page read out. Go ahead, Robin.
The picture was taken by Mr. Tom Blair of the flames above the Stardust roof. We reckon that photograph was taken about 1:30 or slightly before, maybe 1:25. We believe it was incorporated within the 1981 Stardust Tribunal record book by Justice Keane, but it was unexplained. We now know that it was taken at the time it was taken before 1:30 on the night of or the early morning of the 14th of February, and we know what one can see is the flames above the roof of the Stardust building, but no one as yet ever explained that. Justice Keane didn't explain it. Paul Coffey in 2008 did not explain it.
Okay, right. Okay, well, this is Paul Coffey's independent report. It's dated the 8th of December 2008. But I've asked somebody to confirm that this is an actual page from the report. And the report states on page 67, and I'm going to read out the published report as well, because this fact will change between the two of them. It says, in the absence of any actual evidence, and Robin's going to keep holding up the picture, in the fact of any actual evidence that the fire started or involved the storeroom, the criticism is no more than the contention that the tribunal should have trawled more diligently through the roof space. Now, obviously, by that picture, there's a fire in the roof space, right? And what Coffey said then was, he said, trawled through more diligently through the roof space for a hypothetical explanation of fire. Accordingly, I reject that intention. Problem is that I just want to go to the second, the one in public record, which is this one. And if you go to page 67 of this one, it's actually, this one's a little bit less. We go to page 67, right. Now, he said, in the absence of any fraud mythology, that's what he's saying here. In the absence of any actual evidence that the fire started or involved the storeroom, the criticism is no more than a contention that the tribunal should have trawled more diligently through the roof space for a hypothetical explanation of fire. Accordingly, I reject this contention. Okay. Now, from that picture there, can anybody agree with Paul Coffey's conclusion that this fire was not in the roof space? And just to prove he used the picture, I will take his report, which obviously is in tablets because we've tried through it a lot. He uses that picture in his report and he comes up with that conclusion. So my thing now is, I have to say to Kathleen Lynch, I have to say to Andy Kenny, and I have to say to Amy Gilmore, Tommy Brown, the officials in the Department of Justice, they didn't read Coffey's report. Because you can't have a photograph in his report showing us that there's this peak flame above the ridge of the roof space, there's a fire in the roof space, and he comes back and he says, there's no evidence of fires in the roof space. But apart from that, the disgraceful thing of Paul Coffey's report is, he claims he read 122 days transcript to write his report. If he read them, he could not have missed the evidence of George Glover, isn't that right, Robin?
That's correct,
The 999 call operator in Tara Street Station. He couldn't have missed the P&T evidence that took the 999 call, and he couldn't have missed Brenda Kelly's evidence that made the call. And all this evidence states that fire is well established above the roof space before it's on the seat at 1:41 AM at an 18-inch fire. So I put it to Kathleen Lynch, Andy Kenny, Amy Gilmore, and all the politicians in Dáil Éireann that endorsed this report with the houses of the Oireachtas that said, oh great, we've Coffey's report, this is wonderful, welcome it, welcome it. And then they come back and they tell us, oh, by the way, we've had Paul Coffey. Okay. Paul Coffey is right. It's the same thing what they've done with the Keane report. We had Keane's report. It was 122, an exhaustive investigation. Go away, leave us alone. Now, as we've had Paul Coffey up to, according to this Dáil debate, this is up to last Wednesday in the Dáil. We've had Paul Coffey. Paul Coffey said, you know, everything Paul Coffey said is right. The House of the Oireachtas endorsed them. There's nothing more we can do. We don't see any reason why we can change the Coffey, or the refusing the Coffey's report. Well, there's a problem for them. Because there's a submission that we're launching today to the media, because Enda Kenny looked for submission from the families. And we told the families there's no more submissions. It's time we saw theirs. Because I have another Freedom of Information request. And the submissions in this Freedom of Information request, which basically are for 2 years homework on my behalf, is basically telling me that they regurgitated all the fraud and perjury evidence in Ronan Keane about, you know, the 6.119 paragraph, which alludes to the fact that there is a storeroom on the ground floor, it's not covered in, and the fuel, you know, it's opened up to the roof space. In the real fire, I hope Robin put the picture up on the wall. Right.
Good enough, no.
In the real fire, which is on the table here, if you can see this picture, this is the real building. This was taken by OSI, and you can see that there's a first floor level storeroom here with a concrete slab over it, right? And this contradicts the Keane's finding in 6.119, which is fraud-based. Now, we have asked the government, since Coffey's report, the past and present government, to remove 6.119, pare it back, and we get to the truth due to the transcripts. But all we hear is, we've had the Coffey report, and just to state, if the fire, if the storeroom on the ground floor is opened up to the roof space, as the paragraph 6.119 alleges, how come there's a concrete slab floor enclosing that storeroom? Why isn't that on public record, right? And you see, the problem is when evidence goes wrong, you get an unrealistic conclusion drawn, an unrealistic hypothesis. So because Enda has looked for submission of the families, we won't approve it. So we're asking the media to download this submission off the internet and post it on the page. See, it addresses the Taoiseach government buildings. But the other thing is, it highlights, it gives you the proof. If I read out some of the items in it, the most important fundamental rights of the deceased victims. So we have noted here fraud on public record. See, there's a heading in it, right? And it says, 1, basement floor level is perjury, no basement existed. 2, one storeroom in Stardust building opened up to roof space, paragraph 6.119 of the King's Tribunal, and regurgitated in the Coffey review. Fraud-based because the Stardust had 2 storerooms, one on ground floor level, and over it a concrete floor slab with a first floor level storeroom. Right? 3, Keane and Coffey state the fire started on a seat. God love them. Keane stated in chapter 7 of his report, paragraph 7.1, before the scientific tests, fire tests, the tribunal has established that the fire was not in the roof space before the seat fire. The Keane report, paragraph 2.79 on page 96 of his report, timeline of offence states clearly the fire got in the roof space until 1:46 a.m. Now, we do know the 999 call is at 1:43. For Coffey review states on page 67, the fire not in the roof space at all, and on page 17 of his report, he uses perjury evidence in support of his conclusions. Both reviews were wrong, as the 999 call places this fire well established in the roof space, first floor level storeroom, witnessed by 36 exterior witnesses, exterior public people, long before the fire is seen on the scene, 18 inches high, 148. So we're asking the public to actually download that submission, post it into Enda Kenny, right? Because if Enda Kenny gets so many submissions, it's fairly well laid out from it, it's all completely explained to him, you couldn't miss the points in it. And one of the most important points is that he hasn't, his treatment of the Stardust case is no different to the Louisa case, the Louisa O'Keefe case, the Golden Bridge Orphanage case, the Madden Laundries case, the clerical abuse case, the hepatitis C case, and so on. They have this, like it's a robot format. This is how we treat these arguments for natural justice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it to Kathleen Lynch and everybody that was in the Dáil on the 23rd of January and in the House of the Senate in July, and Shatter and the Kenny, the whole lot of them, they have not read Paul Coffey's report. And I'm handing you back to Rob.
I downloaded the Dáil record of the 12th of February just a couple of days ago, and I'll give you some idea of my response that I sent off to Kathleen Lynch and to Alan Shatter last evening. I said, Madam Minister, it's almost a year ago since Minister Alan Shatter TD sent you into the Dáil to pontificate again on his behalf. That's happened a year ago, and to this document I've attached my response to your Dáil statement on pontification of the 27th of March 2013, and I've attached it to the document. I've also attached, for your benefit, the transcript of the Dáil record of the 12th of February of this year, just a couple of days ago. It seems to me that Mr Shatter and yourself, Minister, have no interest whatsoever in determining the truth about the deaths and the maiming of so many Irish citizens in the Stardust disaster 33 years ago in 1981. Despite your politics of sympathy, you have failed and neglected to address the sworn lies that were relied upon by Justice Keane in 81 and by the eminent legal person, Mr Paul Coffey, Senior Counsel, in 2008.